Hello and welcome back to Hindsight is 50/50. I'm the host J-Rod with my co-host the ORG. Dad, how you doing?
I'm doing good, but I heard you were not doing so good, and we missed a week because you weren't feeling very good.
We did, yeah. I mean, I'm still recovering, but I'm doing better. I had no voice at all, and to be honest, I couldn't hear hardly anything. But I kind of had a double bacterial infection going on, one with a little more with my lungs and one with my nose. So it was kind of a nice sinus infection combo that put me down pretty good. But
Nice
the
combo.
the whole family got sick. But the good thing is that they are all much better at handling this than I am. So the wife shook it in a few days, even though it beat her up pretty good. My youngest, who's a year old, it took him about 3 days to shake it. And then my oldest, who's 3 years old, I think he had a stuffy nose for about half a day. So they all they shook
He's an
whatever we
Iron
got.
Man.
He really is. I mean, he was like that with COVID. We've had COVID. We think this may have been it, but there's kind of no point in testing. We've had it tested for it twice. And then this sickness, whatever it is, which they have had a spike in some COVID patients in the hospital. And last time I got COVID, it left me with a bacterial infection. So leads us to believe this is the case. JJ, both times that we for sure had COVID and then this sickness, he's been sick for a total of 2 days out of all of it. I mean, he's just unbelievable.
Yeah, he is, man. He's an Iron Man. He's got a great immune system, which, at my age, I don't. I mean, I told you it wasn't anything like what you've had, but I fought through some kind of a bug. I don't know what it is. It's more than just the post colonoscopy blues.
Colon blow.
It's more than colon blow. But yeah, I I had
one of those
a
things
really bad day on Saturday. Really bad day on
It's
Saturday.
one of those things you don't value until it's gone, though. Is that immune system? Like, you don't realize how incredible it is.
Oh, big time. Big time, and when you like it wasn't like coming out both ways, but it was only coming out the bottom way. But when you have something that even gives you the threat of being a dual threat,
Yeah.
it is not a comfy position. It reminds me of one of my cousins. His name's Bo, and he is a big, tall, rangy kid, and I went on a hunting trip with 3 of my uncles. My Uncle Walt, that they called Chig, my Uncle Bud, and my Uncle Paul. And Bo was with us. Now, we would make arrangements to stay different ways. Sometimes we stayed in tents, sometimes we slept in the back of trucks. I mean, it was never anything elaborate. Well, Chig, his name was Walt got this pickup camper, and he, volunteered to bring that up. Well, it's a pickup camper, with the thing that goes over the top of the cab, and, there's sleeping quarters up there. And I think they're designed to sleep 5, but, it's not 5 people aren't going to stretch out and be totally comfortable. But, I mean, it was self-sufficient. It had a furnace, and it had a bathroom and all that. As tiny as they were, on this thing, you can fit on the back of
You're all not little dudes either.
No. Well, and Bo, who was really young, and he was coming along, and that was the first time he ever got to come. Now, he ever got to go on the hunting trip, and we went to Northern Michigan, and Bo was like a legendary eater. He didn't like he didn't look it because he's really like raw boned and pretty thin actually. Um, he beefed up, as he got into his late teens and turned 20. He started lifting and stuff, but he's always a big, rangy guy. But I mean, the guy could eat more than three people, and he always could. So we're up there in northern Michigan, out in the middle of the woods, and we're down this 2-track, and we set up a camp. Same place we did annually. And we're all going to sleep in this camper. So there's, 5 of us, and nobody's tiny. And Bo, everybody brings all kinds of food. I mean, you bring all kinds of stuff from home and coolers and, just everything. You eat good when you're at deer camp, right? And Bo, who, like I said, legendary eater, I mean, that first night, I don't even know how much that kid ate. And he wasn't, he might have been 16, but he was a big, tall kid. And I don't know how much that kid ate. I mean, because with Bo, you just didn't pay attention because it was always so much. But I mean, he was literally like a kid in a candy store. Everybody's got, cookies and, different things and that you bring that are kind of pre-made where all you got to do is heat them up and all this kind of stuff. And like I said, we always ate well.
Endless buffet style. Yeah.
And Bo ate really, really well. Well, through the night, and there's 5 of us in there, and I'm sleeping in the part that's over the hood over the top of the pickup, like in that part that sticks out over the cab.
Mm-hmm.
I'm up there on my back with about 6 inches of clearance between the ceiling of that thing.
You're like in a little sandwich.
And I keep hearing the toilet flush. And then I hear these groans. Well, it was Bo, and he would, one minute he was puking, the next minute he was crapping. So I don't know what time of the morning it was, but it's like, and you hear these groans, and it's dark.
Yeah.
And I mean, this is like in the fall, so I mean, the furnace is on and all this. Well, at 2 or 3 in the morning, my uncle Paul is the one who's next to a light, and he hears this noise, and he just pulls on this light switch, and the whole thing lights up, and Bo's naked ass is sticking out in the hallway from this tiny bathroom. Because he couldn't decide if he was gonna throw up or gonna have
Yeah.
diarrhea. And he didn't even bother to pull his pants up, but I'm sure he didn't expect that anybody was gonna turn the light.
Get your poopy ass out of here.
Yeah. And and then, like I said, he's a big dude, so we wake up and it's like everybody's kind of squinting their eyes because of the light. And you can't help but see, because it's this tiny bathroom and Bo's like 6'4", and and his bare ass is sticking out in the hallway.
That is awesome.
Pickup camper. So we jokingly called it the ass in the hallway flu.
Nice.
Ru- Ironically, or not so ironically, the water tank on the camper, he used it all up the first night flushing the toilet.
Oh no.
So we had to, break camp and then go fill the tank again and all that stuff. But yeah, so I know all about that stuff.
But I mean, at that point, like, I mean, they make toilet seats that hook up to the trailer hitch. They make ones that tie to trees. It's like, dude, just go outside and just shit and throw up on the ground. Like,
and we had
Jesus.
one of those. We had we would do that like out in the woods. We would set up. Well, you wouldn't even set up a toilet because we had just a little folding seat that was like on a stool, And
Yeah.
it literally was a toilet, like a toilet seat on a stool. So you
Yeah.
just go out and find a place in the woods. But we also had these things called sun showers that were a bag that you fill with water. You hang it up with a rope in a tree, and we would take like black plastic and literally make a shower stall. And all you had to do was lower that thing down, go fill it with water, and then because it was black on one side, the sun would heat it up. And then the nozzle you just click on and off, and you'd have like a shower there. I mean, it wasn't all that primitive. It was, but it wasn't. I mean, we were trying our best to do the
I
modern
mean, you're
conveniences.
sophisticated in a bear
But
situation.
now
So
again,
that's
dude, this is 30, 40 years ago too. In fact, probably closer to 40, 40 years ago.
I'm
So
just saying, I would rather be shitting and throwing up outside against a tree than have people witness me doing the camper.
well, again,
Like I would have ran outside.
he's a 15 or 16-year-old kid. We are out in the woods. I'm sure that he wasn't anxious to go out there by himself.
That's fair.
But, so
Well, and you
again,
are
there
in
was
hunting country, so you don't know what's
and
out
it,
there.
and it was his first, yeah, I mean, there's black bear there, there's critters, there's bobcats, there's all kinds of stuff. That
Okay, just real question though. Did black bear scare you?
no, but they should
Now,
because
see, like if a black bear came at me, I'd just yell at it because one, they're typically, more scared of anything than things being scared of them. But two, they're just not insanely vicious creatures. But it's for me, I would be 10 times more worried about a bobcat than I would a black bear.
now those really don't want anything to do with you unless there's something wrong with them, unless they're
Right.
rabid.
Well, you
But a
usually don't
black
see
bear,
them unless something's wrong with them.
yes, that's true. But a black bear, and we lived in northern Michigan for a while. You were born up there. You were born
Yeah.
in Ludington.
Ludington.
And
Yeah.
there was actually a bear on the golf course at the country club in Ludington one time. It made the local newspaper that a black bear was hanging around on the golf course, and it's like, well, what do you do if you see a black bear? And it's like
Yell
I'd let
at
him
it.
play through.
Yeah. Go ahead.
But the locals up there, because I'm not from up there, but we did live up there for a while, and even north of that for a little bit. And there are black bear there, obviously, but the locals, and you can watch YouTube videos about it. Black bear, you're right. Many times they don't want anything more to do with you than you. They want less to do with you than you want to do with them. But there are videos on YouTube about where black bear attack people, and it's like, and there's standoffs, and the locals up there, they would say that the bad news about a black bear is the good news is they don't kill you like big brown bears do. You know, the bad news is if a black bear does kill you, it'll eat you. Where a grizzly lots of times won't. It'll just play with you until you're dead or make sure you're dead. And that's why lots of people survive by playing dead. I don't know if that's true or not, but I do know that more than one local who had lived up there their whole life, that's what they said, is that, you know, no, they usually don't mess with you, and they usually go away. Unless you come upon them, surprise them. And then that's usually you're in a mother cub situation, which is never good.
Right.
If you,
That's when you get the hell out.
yeah,
But I
it's like
mean,
anything. You get
Melissa,
between a buffalo and its calf, you better get out of there and
yeah.
hope you can.
I mean, you hear stories. I mean, all the time. Like there's one just a few years ago that I heard about where a guy was jogging on like a hiking path and a mountain lion attacked him. And it's there's nothing you can do other than defend yourself, but what a lot of people, I guess forget to realize is that it's like, yeah, they have teeth, they have claws and all these weapons, but it's like a grown man is in a lot of cases bigger than some of these cats. I'm not saying a
Oh,
tiger, but like a mountain lion. You're
oh
way
yeah,
bigger.
for sure.
And I mean, he choked it to death. He killed the cat and to defend his life. And the reason I asked you about the black bear was, you know, Melissa talks about wanting to go camping and all this stuff, and sometimes it's, you know, like cottage camping, and other times it's rustic camping that she wants to do in the future. And she's like, you know, what would you ever do if we ran into a bear? And I, you know, first off, you know that I'm a Second Amendment guy. So
Yep.
the biggest thing to me is I've told her I want to be able to either put enough rounds into it to kill it or to scare it or both. And so for me, a Glock 20 is the go-to. It's semi-automatic. Um, I'm used to the Glock platform, but the Glock 20 shoots a 10 millimeter round, which is more devastating to bear than most pistol cartridges. Not all, but then several. And even some big game hunters prefer that over your larger Magnum revolvers. So that was my first thing. But the second thing, she's like, well, what would you do if we're in a scenario when you can't get to it? And it's like, I'm a dad. I'm going to defend my family. I said, the good thing about black bears being the biggest bear in Michigan, because we don't have like grizzly bears, or at least in this peninsula, or I'm
No, we
sorry,
don't.
not in the
There's no
northern peninsula,
grizzlies here
but I don't
in
know if
either.
there's any brown bear up north. I
No,
didn't.
no,
So,
just black.
but I said the best thing about a black bear is it's like it's got claws and teeth. It's gonna kick my ass, but it's in my weight class. Like we're gonna get
that's
after
true.
it while you guys get away. Like that's and you know, so I mean that was always the thing with me is it's like if it's hunting and there's a black or camping and it's a black bear, it's like I'm gonna try and startle you, but you know, you're not this 800-pound creature. It's like you could be 150 to 400 pounds from what I've seen online, and it's like that puts you right in my weight class. I'm gonna give you hell.
Well, you know, our local barber, you remember Keith the barber?
Yes,
He
very good
killed
guy.
like it wasn't a state record, but it was right at a state record. That bear was almost 500 pounds.
Was it
So,
in his shop?
yes, yes, he had that mount in his barbershop. Yes. And that was in the UP. That was in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. But I think I told this story. I lose track of how many Alan stories I've told, but Alan and I were backpacking on the High Country Pathway. And we went, I want to say 45 miles in 3 days.
And you're okay, so you're not backpacking on like motorcycles, you're hiking.
No, we were hiking. We
Okay.
absolutely were hiking. We, you know, and there is a trail along and it runs east west along northern Michigan in the lower peninsula of northern Michigan, almost to the Straits of Mackinac. That's called the High Country Pathway. And it runs through Pigeon River area, and that's where the elk herd is. That's where the Michigan elk herd is. And you know, elk are great big critters. Now we
Wow.
saw all kinds of signs of elk, and we were right in the middle of their country. I mean, we hiked right through it. And this is when we were, you know, 30-ish. But we hiked right through that elk country, and we never saw a live elk. We heard all kinds of coyotes at night. We heard bobcats, and those bobcats sound weird. I mean, it's an
It's like a
eerie
kid
sound.
crying. I don't
It
like
almost
it.
sounds like a kid crying. It almost sounds like that. But we were down doing dishes in the Pigeon River after dinner, and it was almost dark. And we heard this crashing through the woods. And then all of a sudden, we heard a splash in the river. And I thought it was an elk. I mean, it sounded like an elk on the run. It was something big because you heard timber cracking and all this stuff. It was a black bear. And I don't know if it got into bees or what had happened, but something ran it out of the woods. It jumped in the river, got across because where we were at, the Pigeon River was moving pretty fast, but it wasn't very wide. And we were down
Okay.
there doing our dinner dishes. And this bear we heard it splash, and then you could see it, and it loped up the riverbank that we were on about 30 yards away from us and never broke stride. And that was at least a 250-pound bear. And talk about two grown men shitting their pants. Because we had no weapon. We had a camp axe. That's all we had with us, was one of those little shovels that's got a pickaxe on the other end.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, that's all we had for
Little
a
like
weapon.
marine tool.
And and that bear, I mean, it was a great thing to see. That was a long time, again, we're in our early 30s. So that's a long
There's
time
no
before cell phone cameras and stuff.
yeah.
But that's a true story,
There's no
and that
doubt
was
they'd scare the
exciting.
shit out of you.
Oh
There's no
yeah, it
doubt
was.
though. Again, and this might be the way I think, like that for sure is gonna startle you, but like I think more than the bear, I'm like, what the fuck is the bear running from? That's what I don't want. Like if
Well,
something's bothering that bear,
yeah.
I need to leave.
Yeah, and you're right. I didn't even think about that at the time. The coolest thing was, and again, if I've told this story, I may have told this story. Do you recall me telling this on a previous podcast?
Talking about bears
This
or the hiking?
particular bear story.
No, not at all.
Okay, so if I did, I apologize because I thought maybe I had, because I hadn't told this story in a while, but it is true. Well, we were, you get maps of the high country pathway, and there are campgrounds that have like wells so you can replenish your water supply. They have pit toilets. Well, that's not where we camped. We camped in the woods, like along the river. But the next morning, we looked at the map and I saw it's only about a half mile to where there's a well. So we just thought we'd replenish our water supply. So I walked down to that campground half mile away. And I'm, filling up our canteens to take back. And there were people camped at that campground. And there was a bunch of young couples, and they were all in their LL Bean outfits and they were doing the outdoor thing. And they're kind of all just sitting around having coffee, and they were real close to where that water well was. So I'm sitting there filling up the canteens, and I see all these couples there, and I said, "Did you guys see the bear last night?" And all these women are going, "Bear? You didn't tell me there was going to be bear." But it was true. I mean, I didn't even realize that I had, kind of threw all the guys under the bus. I wasn't trying to do that because I asked them, "Did you see the bear
Like,
last
thanks,
night?"
Dale. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good fucking job.
Yeah, foot in mouth. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
I didn't mean to do that, but it was an added benefit that it wasn't my intention, but it was added benefit. But yeah, I mean, there's bears in northern Michigan, and
I mean, like even a black bear's claws and teeth aren't the same as a grizzly. Like a black bear's claws are kind of like not like a dog's, more like a cat's. Like they have the hook on it, but they're not these 4-inch talons like a grizzly has. I mean,
they're not the same size bear. No, no
not
way.
even close. But I'm just talking about their weapons. It's almost like a black bear is much more foraging as to where a grizzly is much more predator.
Yeah,
That's how their weapons are kind of built on their bodies.
They're both omnivores.
Now, there was something that I thought of just because we were talking, about these animals and their freakish size. I saw a video a couple years back, and it just made me think of this just because you were talking about elk and we were talking about bear and all this stuff, and grizzly bears are enormous. I mean, they're huge. But one of the most freakishly large animals is a moose, and they actually kill a lot of people. And people don't think of them as a threat, but it's like when a moose is pissed, it is trouble. And it's one of the most deceiving things. You go to like a Cabela's or something, you stand next to that moose. It's like that thing is not like a full-size Canadian moose. That is like a juvenile or something, because a full-size Canadian moose looks about double the size of the stuffed one you see at Cabela's. And I was watching a video where a Moose mom was there with her calf, and a grizzly bear tried to attack the calf while it was coming out of the water. And this moose ran up and scooped it like a loader bucket with its antlers and launched that bear like 5 feet in the air and probably 10 feet in distance.
Oh,
I
and
mean,
they'll
just
they'll
launched
strike
it.
too. I mean, you see that a lot where they'll strike with their front paws, and like you said, an animal that big, that means, you know, that kill you. I mean, like in a heartbeat, that could
Yeah,
kill you.
they're playful
Knock you
like a
down,
baby elephant.
knock you unconscious, and then stomp you to death. I mean,
Yeah.
I've encountered one moose in the wild, and it was in the Grand Tetons, in the Teton National Park. And I was on the motorcycle. I was on the 1100 Honda that I'm looking at right now in my basement. And we had stopped because there was a bunch of people stopped because there was a whole herd of elk that were grazing not far off the road. And we'd stopped and we looked at those, and they were a ways away. They weren't a quarter mile or anything. They weren't that far away, but they were. We got as close as we wanted to get to them because the elk's a big animal too. And we got started, and he was riding that 1500 Vulcan, and I was on this 1100 Honda. And they both have the straight pipes. They're both loud pipes, and it would be, we joked about it. We laughed about it because as you would ride those bikes through those mountain ranges, they automatically, people call it an engine brake or a Jake brake, Well,
Mm-hmm.
those big twins with those straight pipes, they do that. And it's like, pop, pop. And I mean, you can hear it a ways with straight pipes. We hadn't been gone from where those elk were a minute and a half. And right across the road, there was a cow and a calf, but the calf was probably 2/3 grown. The cow had, no antlers or anything like that. I was sitting on that Honda, and that seat's a little bit low, but I was sitting on that Honda, and the hump on that moose was taller than my head on the bike. And I'm 6'2", and I mean, it's not as high as me standing, but it's almost as high as me standing when I'm sitting on that bike.
Oh yeah,
And
absolutely.
so I immediately grabbed both brakes, and the bike did that. Pop, pop, like that, only really loud. And the moose, both of them hit high gear and got out of the way. But they literally crossed the road within yards of us, no more than 15 yards. And when you see them that close, and again, you're on a motorcycle, I was wearing my helmet at that time because I usually do, but it's a scary sight because, man, that is a big animal. And I can't imagine. I see some of these, I watch these Alaska shows like a lot of people do, and I love them. And part of the fascination is seeing these big, majestic animals like grizzly bear and like moose. Now, in Michigan, we have the elk herd. They have reintroduced wolverine in the UP because we basically didn't have any wolverines.
That's an animal I won't fuck with.
No,
No.
and everything that I'm told is that you shouldn't.
I mean,
They've
that is
introduced
one.
wolves. They had wolves on Isle Royal. They always have had, even though the population's way down on Isle Royal National Park. But they've reintroduced wolves into the UP. And the last I knew, I haven't looked lately, but they were doing okay. And they've reintroduced moose. And there's a few of those in the UP now. There's also, they've spotted on game cameras, they've spotted cougar mountain lions in the UP. Not many, but there are
Yeah,
some. So
yeah, they have, and I mean, they're. That's the thing is like there's a lot of good wildlife in Michigan.
yeah,
It's just uh, like in particular Michigan, and I'm not sure if it's their prey or their food source, but the animals aren't quite as large. I mean, like a black bear, I want to say they can get up to 600 pounds, but like in Michigan, 400 pounds would be enormous.
Right.
And the cats are the same way. Even some of the bigger deer, until you get up into the UP or very northern part of the southern peninsula, it's just, I mean, that's your bigger deer aren't going to be some of the size of, you'd find out west. They're
Well,
just not as big animals.
yeah, and they're not now, and it's the opposite. Like the Michigan whitetail are bigger than Texas whitetail, generally speaking. They're not as big as like mule deer out west, but like where the deer are corn fed, like down here, like there's been there were several years in a row when I used to track this that the biggest deer in the state was killed in Jackson County, like each year for several years in a row. And Jackson County is in southern central Michigan,
But
but it's
that makes
all the
sense.
farms.
Well, it's not just all the farms though. You're also below the shotgun line.
The rifle line. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's actually called the shotgun line, but
Is it?
so you're using shotguns in the southern part of the lower peninsula of Michigan. So these deer, these monster deer that typically, at least the way logic would tell me, typically a big deer grows to that size by being skittish. It it didn't get killed early on. But if you're above the shotgun line, then these deer can be shot from, 300 yards or more. As to where when you're at the shotgun line, you just reduced that range substantially. Not only like the state land isn't as wide open down here, but also just because you're using a shotgun, your distance to target has to be substantially closer. And so I think these deer have an opportunity to constantly flee by being in southern Michigan. And they get to these safe harbors where, I mean, you've seen it. How many times have you seen 15 or 20 deer standing out in the open because they know that for years no one's been allowed to shoot here? So they all congregate right here. We saw it when we both worked for Levy. We saw it at the gravel pits
Oh
that
yeah.
there were deer would go there because there's no shooting at the gravel pits. And so I think that when you get to these farms where they can eat, and then you don't have the distance to kill the big deer that spook easy from a ways away, I think they live longer and they get bigger and bigger, and then eventually somebody's going to come across it and kill it. And that would kind of make sense to me that it would happen in southern Michigan.
And I just, we were talking about black bears and I just looked it up. In 2019, a bear that the best they could weigh it because they field dressed the bear and weighed it, and this was in Menominee County in the Upper Peninsula. A black bear had a field dress weight of 645 pounds. On the hoof, or
Okay.
on the paw, so to speak, they estimate because his field dress weight was 645, 730 pounds.
That's a big
That
ass bear.
that's a great big bear, and they don't run that big. You're right. Most of them are much, much smaller, but they're still big enough to do damage, and they still have teeth and claws, like you said. Not like a grizzly, but they still got them. But
Yeah,
I
they
didn't.
absolutely do. It's just, it's really weird because I didn't know it until I started looking into it. But the difference, when not just in size and like even a grizzly bear has a hump on its back, but it's meant to help produce more force through its shoulders and paws, just like how
Sure.
a polar bear has it, and it's used to pounce through the ice to get seals,
Yeah.
or fox or whatever they come across. Like those things, fine, I understand it because it's how they hunt. But the in specific, their snout and their claws are what kind of was amazing to me because a grizzly's claws are, if you're a knife guy, they're like a karambit knife. I mean, they are curved, they are meant to slash, they're
Yeah.
meant to tear. They're like the, bear claw shredders you have for pulled pork. I mean, that's how they're designed. And their faces are pan shaped so that when they bite, their teeth actually get further into you instead of being kind of stuck against their snout, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
as to
I
where a
mean,
black bear has a longer nose and has these shorter J-shaped claws, and it's all just like picking and pruning tools would be for foraging.
well, I don't want them picking and pruning on me, I'll tell you
No,
that.
I'm they're still very dangerous creatures. I
I
just
y
I
you know,
just thought it was fascinating the difference
for
between them.
years, I wanted to hunt, and my uncle Bud, and my uncle Paul both got black bears in Canada, and one of my cousins, Gary, went with them, and he got a black bear too. And they had the guide and the whole thing, but for years I wanted to do that. I don't want to do that anymore. I've gotten old and soft, and I like it that they're around. I don't want to encounter a wolverine, but I like the fact that they're still around, at least in the UP. I like the fact that there's moose in the state. I like the fact that there's wolves in this state, and I don't care about seeing any of them. The weirdest thing that we have to worry about around here are feral pigs. Those feral hogs are all over the place.
Yeah,
And, they're a hybrid, a crossbred between a domestic pig and a wild pig. And there's, game ranches that have wild pigs. Well, the wild pigs get out. And guess what? They breed with domestic pigs. And then you've got a feral pig. And they've been killed around here. They've been killed around Manchester, Michigan now. In states like Texas and Arkansas, they're problems. I mean, because they're prolific breeders. They root and dig everything, and I think in Texas, I want to say, and don't quote me on this, but I believe if you have a hunting license of any kind of a hunting license, you can kill a feral hog because they just want them gone. I know it used to be, I don't know if it still is in Michigan, it was that way with coyotes. If you had any kind of a valid hunting license, you could kill a coyote because they're so prolific. And, coyotes adapt, man. They're like rats and cockroaches. They're going to be here when we're gone because they figure out how to get by.
so right here, I just wanted to look that up about Texas because I did not know that. And the question is, do I need a license to hunt feral hogs in Texas? It says there's a good reason why feral hogs can be hunted year round in Texas. These determined invaders are so destructive, so prolific, they are only one of two species in Texas that can be hunted year round without a license on
Oh,
private property.
there you go. On private property. There you
On
go.
private, yeah.
That's the restriction. But hey,
But I mean, that's good. I mean, again, when you have a nuisance animal that's a breeder, that's a freaking problem. I mean,
well,
that is,
you know, at our house, you hear coyotes all the time. And I mean, Max, our dog, he doesn't like that. And Maggie wasn't scared of much. And when Maggie was around, she didn't like it either. When you'd hear them, we don't see them out here because we don't have to, because they got enough cover. You and I, we've seen them at our office, and our office is in a developed area. They
yeah.
adapt, man. Coyotes adapt, and like feral hog, and they're prolific, and feral hogs are too. And there's been feral hogs killed within 10 miles of where I'm sitting right now.
Well, the
And
percentage, go ahead.
no, it's like you're right. They're a problem.
The percentage of winning too when it comes to animals like that is what blows my mind. Like people always want to go to the stories. There was one a few years back that was in the news, and it was a pit bull, but it was probably more of one of those Cane Corso dogs. You know, it was a bully breed. And they labeled it a pit bull, but it would have been an extra large pit bull. Um, but essentially, this owner showed up to a vet, and his dog was cut all over, all over. And I mean, this dog had to get supposedly hundreds of stitches. And the vet wanted to know what was going on and didn't want to release the dog because, the vet didn't know if it was dog fighting or what the hell was going on. So the owner went home and he just went back and started following the dog's blood through the backyard and out into the woods. And when he got out there, he just found bits and pieces of 9 coyotes. And it's like, well, yeah, it's a great big dog. And a lot of times coyotes are malnourished. And so it's like, is it possible? Yeah. And people want to feel all good about this story, but it's like, there's a reason coyotes are so prolific. And it's because for every one story you heard about this badass dog killing 9 coyotes, they killed like 2,000 dogs. And I mean that's how it is here. Like we don't have to worry about the coyotes in big packs like we did when I lived at home with you guys, where you wouldn't want your dog to be outside because you can see 13 or 15 eyes out there.
Right.
We don't have to worry about that. We just have to worry about like the 2 strays, but they're supersized coyotes because everybody thinks, oh, there's no coyotes in this urban area, and then their little dogs get eaten, and it makes the news every year. And so, I mean, that part of it to me is one of the understatements. Is it's like for every loss we hear about, for all the trapping, for them getting their ass kicked by a bigger animal, whatever the case is, it's like these are scavengers that win like 99% of the time, or else they don't live.
They adapt, man. Now, you looked up Texas feral hogs. I just looked up Michigan feral hog hunting rules. Says a person may kill swine running at large on private property if the person is or is accompanied by or has the permission of the owner or the lessor of the property,
Hell
lessee of
yeah.
the property. A person may kill swine running at large on public property if he or she possesses either of the following: a license to carry a concealed pistol, a valid hunting license for any game issued under Natural Resources and Environmental Protection Act. So with any hunting license or with a CPL, you can kill a feral hog even on public land.
I mean, yeah, good. They're gross. And
They're
they are a problem.
gross, and because they're a crossbreed, they're big. They're gross looking, but they're big.
And I
They're
think
bigger
that's
than
the
a
fear,
wild
right?
pig. What
That's the fear is they have the tusks, the hair, the weapons of a feral hog, but they have the size of a
The
domestic
size of a
pig.
domestic pig. Yeah. Yeah. And it's a combination of those 2 things. I mean, there's been some huge ones killed. I know we got off on sidetrack. We do have to catch up on a couple things.
Yeah, we're about 45 minutes in right now. I know that there's some football news we wanted to cover. Obviously, we missed a week of football. Um, and I have no problem coming back to this stuff. I think people like when you and I get sidetracked and banter, and I'm sure people probably like our stories a little bit more than all of our sports talk. But there are some things that I would at least like to go through somewhat quickly about what took place. So in the week that we didn't have a podcast last week, the Lions played the Vikings, who I believe were 10-2 at the time,
Yes.
and the Lions beat the Detroit Lions beat the Minnesota Vikings. What appeared to be somewhat convincing. Now I watched highlights of this,
Yeah.
but you watched the game live, correct?
I did. I did.
So what was going on?
The Lions were um in in large part in control of that game. They ended up winning by double digits. It was a home game for the Lions. Like I said, it wasn't a done deal until the end, but I don't think the Lions. I want to say they never trailed in that game.
But when you have a
Um,
drive at the end of the game that can be for the nail in the coffin, you put yourself in a place to end the game there, right? I mean,
well,
that's
yeah,
pretty controlling.
they were up, and I want to say they were up 8,
Yes, they were.
and and they're driving, and they've got like a 3rd and 7. They put our we're driving. The Lions are driving. They're in Minnesota territory. They're at like the 41-yard line, and it's a crucial 3rd down. It's like 3rd and 7. And because if we go down and kick a field goal, there's the time that's left. If we go up by 11, the game's pretty well over at that point. So on the 41, they put our 350-pound, very athletic tackle. They put him in a tight end formation in the slot on the left side. They put him in motion to the right. So you see this giant guy and he plays with a chip. You know, he had that rep at Oregon. He's a little bit chippy, but he's also very athletic for a great big man. We put him in motion. Everybody thinks that he's going to block. And he doesn't. He just keeps going out in the flat, and nobody followed him. And so Jared Goff just drops back and throws a simple little pass to him. He catches it. He turns around, stumbles, but gets the first down.
Dives for the first down.
Yeah, kind of dove, yes.
But it was huge because not only did he get the first, he stayed in bounds to keep the clock running.
He stayed in bounds, kept the clock running. The Lions end up driving a little bit farther down. They kick a field goal, the chip shot field goal. They end up, up by 11, and they end up winning.
There's a couple things about that play that, I give Penei Sewell, the tackle who caught the ball, credit for it. Maybe a few things. One, he did have to turn around. I know that pass was not meant to lead him because you're not trying to throw over the shoulder to a lineman. But he did turn around. He showed soft hands, which, a lot of linemen I would expect to trip and drop the ball. But he showed us soft hands. But the biggest things to me on that play, when he went in motion, he took off sprinting. He sold it like they were running a power O off the right tackle, and he was coming as the pulling guard, but instead coming from the other side as a tight end. And I mean, he sold it. And then as he broke through the line, he chipped the linebacker to give Goff time, but also to make it look like he was getting a seal block.
And they had run that play before. They had showed that play before, and he did exactly what you said. He did turn the corner and was a lead blocker. So,
he sold that play so
when he
well.
When he chipped that LB, and then just kind of kept drifting out to the flat, it was a thing of beauty. It was a gutsy call. It was third down.
You know what, though? I love that because I don't think that needs to be a gamble play. I think that should be part of the offense. When you have a guy that can catch the ball, we're talking, not everybody in the NFL is fast. I know on some level they are, but not everyone's just this burner. A big thing that separates, let's say, a good big-bodied tight end is their ability to get separation within a route and using their body for a catch. So it's like if we are going to put him in motion, have him lead block or anything, and he's got good hands, he only needs separation. He doesn't need to get a ton of yards after the catch. But if he can get us 5 when we really need 5, I think that starts to become part of the offense. Because people have to change their defense every time he's an eligible receiver.
And you can do it. And like you said, you do it, and then you run the other tight end out in the flat the other way.
Right.
There's so many things you could do off of that play.
Or a little bubble screen.
We've already done 2 different things off of it. And so now it's got people wondering. So now you're setting yourself up to do a third thing off of it that doesn't have anything to do with Penei Sewell. It's just all decoy.
And freezes. But a huge part though is it freezes the linebacker. So one of my favorite things, one of my favorite routes that can be run by a running back is an angle route where they jet out. Let's say they start off on the right side of the QB. They're going to jet out either past the tackle or past the tight end, and when they hit the line of scrimmage, they angle back towards the middle linebacker. Now, because they're running towards the flat originally, the linebacker has to follow them and assume that they're going to have to close with, them having to make up on outside pursuit if the running back gets the ball in the flats. But once the running back cuts to the middle, the linebacker now has to react, switch their hips, and run back middle, which that's how you create that space for the running back to catch the ball and take off. With Penei Sewell doing this on a pulling play, what I really like about it setting up in the future is that every time he starts to round that corner, that linebacker has to hesitate. Do I cover him in the flats or is he going to block me?
Sure.
And that allows him to get his hands on that linebacker to block the living shit out of him if it's a run.
That was a gutsy play call. They had a play call, I believe it was in the third quarter. And they were at their own, the Lions were at their own 26. They had 4th and 7. They're in punt formation. They ran a fake punt and they got 30 some yards and got the first down and ended up going down and scoring. Now, I want to say that was the 7th time that the Lions have faked a punt this year.
And that was a direct snap to the up back.
Right? Yes. And that was the 6th time they've converted on a fake punt.
The funny thing about that play was, and I think I sent you a clip of this, MCDC was, or Campbell, the Lions coach, was on the Pat McAfee show. And he was, kind of being interviewed and questioned about some stuff. And one of the things he said about that specific play that I just thought was awesome, and it shows how willing he is to just get on board with the team. Now, obviously, because it worked out, it makes it a lot easier. But the offensive coordinator up in the booth asked if we were going to run the fake. And Campbell has a headset on where he presses a button to talk to them, and just like a walkie-talkie. And when he depresses the button, they can hear him, and when he lets go, they can't hear him. And as he's pressing, he says, "Don't run it." But it wasn't fully depressed, and so by the time his audio came through, the offensive coordinator heard "run it." And the same thing happened, or something similar happened when the Penei Sewell play happened.
I think he was messing with you guys.
I don't think he was messing around with the wave, because I could see him getting distracted, and he said he was looking at the fans and he didn't hear it, and he's like, "Yeah, do it." And he's like, "What the fuck are we doing?"
He's very detail oriented. I think he was playing along, I think, but he's the only one that knows. Maybe,
I think with that fake punt, I think that really happened.
Well, it could have, but I thought he was playing along. He was being part of the show, and it was funny. I mean, if nothing else, it was funny, and it could be true. I thought he was shining everybody.
But that call is insanely ballsy.
It is, man. That's huge.
But, I mean, that's ballsier than most of his 4th down calls.
Well, and
that's why I thought that one was true.
When you go for it, that's the 7th time, and you've made 6 of them, and it didn't catch the Vikings off guard. Their gunner, or the guy who was supposed to block the gunner, he crashed, but we blocked him.
Yeah.
Because he crashed. He read it, that it was a fake, and when he crashed down, we blocked him. So
it starts changing your offense too, because a big part of that is like whether it's 3rd and medium or 3rd and long. I'm not saying 3rd and short, but when you're on 3rd down and it's medium or long, lots of defenses are taught to protect the chains, right? You sit at the 1st down and you keep everything in front of you. But if you are notorious for going for it on 4th and getting it on 4th, that defense isn't going to sit back anymore, because they don't want to give you even one more yard to where you're likely to convert on 4th down. So they start playing up tighter, which allows you to get big break open plays like 1st and 2nd down do. So I really like what he's doing, and obviously it's easy to like it when he's converting a lot, but I would rather be ballsy and lose than passive and
well, that's
win.
fair. And I'm with you. You can debate whether he's gone overboard with that sometimes, and he's made mistakes, but I love his enthusiasm. I like the enthusiasm on this team. I compare it to, it almost seems like a college team.
It does. The energy's there. The
players are predominantly young players, 1st, 2nd, 3rd year guys, and they have some veterans, but not many. And the enthusiasm, I just compare it to a college team. And we had, because we missed the week, they played again yesterday. They beat the Jets 20-17. Now the Jets, the Jets have a good defense. They were missing one of their starters, their D tackles, that Quinnen Williams, who's a really good player. But you know what? This time of year, everybody's missing people.
Right.
And there's still a good defense. And, that makes, again, I don't want to get too much on the Lions because I know not everybody loves the Lions like we do. And I only love them because I grew up having to. And trust me, I've been disappointed enough. It's nice to be able to talk about the Lions in a positive way in December because usually we're talking about what we're going to do in the draft by this time of year. But, they played yesterday in New Jersey against the Jets. And it wasn't, the Jets had something to do with it because the Jets have a darn good defense, even without Quinnen Williams. But it's one of those games where we've talked about this before. You were teasing me about it via text yesterday. It's like good teams win ugly.
They do.
Well, I think right now we're a good team. We started out 1-6 and we weren't a good team. Since then we're 6-1. So now we're 7-7. And we've you look at what happened yesterday. Dallas lost to the Jaguars yesterday. Kansas City got taken to overtime by the Texans. There were 2 or 3 games where a team on the road, a good team on the road, either struggled mightily against a far inferior team. Houston's going to have the first pick in the draft. And Kansas City, if they're not going to the Super Bowl, they're going to be in the conversation. And they had to go to overtime to win. And Dallas, they lost to the same team in overtime that we beat 40-14 3 weeks ago. So I like the enthusiasm on this team. I like what they're doing. I like that good teams win ugly. And when we were talking about the Penei Sewell play yesterday, they had a play in that game that was very similar, only it was to the tight end. It was late. There was somewhere around 2 minutes. I think they had just had the 2-minute warning. The Lions were close to midfield. They had 4th and inches. The Lions on previous 3rd downs and 4th downs had run Amon-Ra St. Brown in motion to the right, and it ended up throwing to him, sometimes with success, sometimes not. They ran the same kind of motion with him. Everybody in the world thinking it's going to the right side. Their tight end, Brock Wright, who I looked it up. He was an undrafted free agent in 2021. He caught 7 passes in 4 years at Notre Dame. And right now, he's our starting tight end. Now, I'm not saying he's elite, but he's our starting tight end, and he looks like he deserves to be our starting tight end. All I'm saying is that's a good find. This GM has done that time and time again with draft picks and undrafted free agents. This was another one. So on 4th and inches, he leaks out opposite way of the motion. You said, right when we were doing show prep, you watched the play. I mean, he was wide open. Goff hit him. Nice. He turns around, and I didn't know the guy was that fast. When I would describe him to Alan, I kept telling him, I go, he catches it if you throw it to him, although he did drop a pass yesterday, but he didn't drop this one. And I just said, I think he's a better blocker than TJ Hawkinson, but he doesn't get downfield as good as TJ Hawkinson does. Well, man, you wouldn't have known that yesterday because he had like a 51-yard touchdown, and most of it was, the pass was about 7 to 10 yards. He ran the rest, and some of it in traffic. So you got to give that GM credit for finding guys. Like, he caught 7 balls in 4 years at Notre Dame, and he was not drafted. And I want to say he's 24 years old. That's a hell of a find. And he came up big yesterday, like we talked. They're playing like a good team right now. I'm trying hard not to, bite hook, line, and sinker because I've done that before and it always comes back to bite me in the ass. With the line, I'm an old retired Lions fan. And so I've seen a lot of stuff that and been disappointed many times over the years.
I just don't feel like we've seen this setup in a while.
And
We're in
Goff
control
didn't
of our
have a
own
great
destiny
game.
right now.
I'm sorry, Jared. I'm talked over you. I didn't mean
No,
to.
you're good. We're in control of our own destiny right now. I mean, it was
Yes.
before we played the Vikings, we had a 20% chance of playing, or after we beat the Vikings, I'm sorry, we had a 20% chance of making the playoffs. Technically, by beating the Jets, that went from 20% to 23%. But that is only based off of our current record. If you assume that we were to try and win out, which I know that's a hard task, but if we were winning out, we have a 90% chance, meaning every team ahead of us that's in our way would have to win out for the rest of the season for us to not make the playoffs. So the Lions having the opportunity to control their own destiny is not a familiar place.
It's
And that's
just
the excitement.
it is. It's exciting. Like I said, I love the enthusiasm of these guys. It looks genuine. You can tell it's genuine on
Hutchinson
Campbell.
gets so pumped up that it
Yeah.
gives me chills when you see how excited he is to play and how happy these guys are for one another. It's
Yeah.
not a prima donna team.
We had one offensive touchdown yesterday. Khalif Raymond, returned a punt 47 yards for a score. We had one offensive touchdown. And again, an away game, we didn't play. I didn't think we played our best, even though I'll give the Jets credit for having a lot to do with that. Goff didn't turn the ball over. He wasn't sacked. We sacked them 4 times. We sacked Zach Wilson 4 times. Our defense came up big when it had to. It wasn't artistic. Let's put it that way, but it's a win, and a win's a win.
But
And
we also scored 20 points.
yeah,
I mean,
well,
how many years when we're talking about the Lions not having a pretty game is it 3 points or no
sure.
points?
What happened this year? We got shut out against New England, and I still don't know how.
I think we needed to learn to win. And that is something that resonates with me personally from my own experience. So maybe people can understand this, maybe people can't. But I'm sure you remember watching me play football growing up. And when I was in 7th and 8th grade, we got our ass kicked every game, and people were just walking around going, when you look at us as individuals, we're the most talented group in the conference. And it went on to be that for even through high school. We had several individual state champions in different sports. We were a very gifted group. But when we combined, we did not know how to win. And we didn't win a game in 7th grade, and we won our last game in 8th grade. And that was our first win. When we got to junior varsity, we went undefeated 2 years in a row because we had finally figured out how to win. And that's where I'm not saying the Lions go undefeated or anything like that, but that's where I feel like they were at 1-6. They may have kind of almost accidentally won a game, but then all the others they were losing and they were still figuring it out. And now it seems like we are in those moments where shit's on the line. We don't punt and let the game get away. We don't give up a huge first down. We are closing out. When we have the chance to put the nail in the coffin, we do it. And I love watching that because they're learning, they're growing together, but it's exciting because they're in every game. They're competitive and they've finally learned how to win. And the offensive coordinator, to me, is doing the best job I've seen. And it's because, just like you're talking about with that tight end on the big play versus the Jets, even when your offense isn't playing well, or the Penei Sewell catch when you're trying to ice out the Vikings game, he's breaking tendencies when it matters. And he's consistently breaking tendencies so nobody can guess what we're going to do when it matters. I love that.
There's a lot to be said for that. Campbell said that yesterday. He said that in the locker room speech. Just what you just said. He said, we're learning how to win, and we're playing winning football. You know, he said this game early in the year, we probably wouldn't have won this game. He made coaching mistakes in that game yesterday. He admitted it. They played through it.
I
They had
love
some
that he
really
admits his own mistakes.
they had inopportune penalties that were uncharacteristic because the Lions have been doing really good on penalties lately. But, you know, when you can play through that and still win, I don't care. I don't care if it's 2-0. If you got 2 and they got nothing, I'll take 2-0. And it's like you said, it's exciting to be able to talk about the Lions in December in a positive way and not be talking about, what we're going to do in the draft in April, which by the way, we're loaded with picks.
Yeah,
I
we
think
are.
we have 5 in the top 75 picks right now. It all depends on how the Lions finish and the picks they traded for. The Rams, they got a pick coming from the Rams and one from the Vikings, but we're going to have 5 of the top 75 players in this draft. And with this GM, with what he's done, I was questioning him early because he's drafting all these guys that were hurt in college. But now those guys are getting healthy, and guess what? Looks like they can all play. So you got to give them credit where credit's due, and it's just fun to be able to talk about the Lions in a positive way. Now, we had mentioned a couple of weeks ago, I think the last time we aired, we had been talking about movies, and I know we talked about a couple, and we had decided we were going to talk about The Ghost in the Darkness.
Yeah, because we talked about the Chicago Field Museum.
Yeah,
And the I believe it's Savo Lions are
the
there.
Lions of Savo. Yes.
And so the story of these lions is that they were actually man eaters. And I mean, you've watched the movie The Ghost in the Darkness a million times more than I have. I do think it's a good movie, but you probably know the intricate details better than I do. So do you want to kind of set forth the story in which that movie is based off of?
Sure. It's a 1996 film, and I'll preface this by saying you're probably you guys had to watch a lot of movies by default. You didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
And some of those you actually liked. Because there were movies that I wanted to watch. And I think this is one of them. I know it is for you. And then like you said, we've both made trips to the Field Museum, and these lions were real. The Lions of Savo were real. And it's a story about an Irish engineer named John Patterson. Val Kilmer plays him in the movie. And he's summoned by this, English diplomat who's trying to finish a railroad across Africa. Now they're making all these claims about how this railroad is for ending slavery and for, to get better aid to the native tribes, etc. But the underlying reason is because it's for the ivory trade. Because at that time, people are selling ivory for great big amounts of money, and it was all still legal.
Right.
And so they hired this John Patterson, who's an engineer, and he's a bridge builder, to build a railroad bridge across the River Savo. And he encounters this settlement where there's all these workers. There's Indian workers, there's Muslim workers, there's all different kinds of people there that are basically, because they don't have machines to do everything. Most of it's manual labor, driving spikes. I don't think they were building rails. I know they were making rivets and things like that. So a lot of this is just handwork because this is taking place in the 1800s. And their camp of all these workers is terrorized by these lions who are, the legend goes, and I don't know this is true, but it's easy to buy when you watch the movie, is that once a lion or a tiger or a leopard gets a taste of human flesh, they don't want anything else. Well, these lions are causing a problem, and it starts like right when Patterson gets there. And he goes out and he kills a lion on the first night he's there. Well, he kills a lion, not the lion. And it turns out there's two of them, and they work together. And, they introduce Michael Douglas in this movie when this British diplomat sees that Patterson's having trouble, and rather than risk slowing down his bridge project, he sends him some help. Well, that character, I looked this up too. He was a made up character. But I didn't know that at the time I watched the movie. His name's Remington. Well, anybody that knows anything about guns, Remington's going to ring a bell. Guns are typewriters, right? Or ammo, right?
Right? What is it?
And
Always be better behind one than holding one, or something
yeah,
like that.
that's what my dad said. It's better to be sitting behind one than carrying one.
There you go.
Yeah. But yeah, he said that to me when everybody thought I was going to get drafted. I ended up not being drafted, but he just said at that time the Vietnam War was going on, and Dad said, take all the typing classes you can in high school. It's better to be sitting behind one than carrying one, because he had carried one. He was in the infantry in the army. But at any rate, they send this guy Remington, who was a fictional character, but it sounds romantic, and I didn't know until I researched it, because I knew we were going to talk about it, that it was a fictional character. But it leads you to believe that this guy has this history with guns and, but he's there to help kill the lions. And it's full of adventure. Again, the soundtrack is great. There's beautiful scenery. These lions do damage. I want to say by the time the movie's over, they've got like 30 workers. And so this guy who's trying to build this bridge on time, and he's an engineer by trade, he's dealing with this diplomat who's putting all kinds of pressure on him. And he's dealing, because all these people are getting killed by these lions, he's dealing with workers that are in revolt and leaving because they're not going to get eaten by lions. And it's just a really, really good story. There's a bunch of really good scenery. There's a bunch of really good music. I'm sure you've seen it enough times that, I don't necessarily want to do the spoiler alert thing because it's a 1996 movie.
Right.
But if you haven't seen it, and you like those kind of adventure things, which I do, and again, fortunately, I think some of those movies that you guys were forced to watch, you liked at least some of them, and this was one.
Well, if you like
But
factual based movies where there's obviously a slight exaggeration, but not an absurd one,
sure, it's
this is a
artistic
great
license.
one in which the research behind the movie is actually what drives the movie. So you get to feel the authenticity of it and how real and how frightening it must be because, again, they're in cloth tents and these lions are there. I just think that's what makes it a good movie. Obviously, the soundtrack's there and the actors are great, but the fact that this really happened and the exaggeration is actually minimizing what those lions did according to record. Now, we don't know what was there. We only have the notes that were written by the actual hunter. But when you get into the nitty gritty and the details, which this is what I love about this type of stuff, those Savo lions, those two males, were linked to eating and killing over 100 people.
Right.
And so the fascinating part about this is like if you go see them in the museum, they don't have manes and they're both
Right.
male lions. It's not just because they're breed, it's because their malnourishment was so bad. So at that time during the railroad being built, there was a cattle plague. And so with all the cattle being dead and rotten, the lions had nothing to eat. And those workers that were forced to work on the railroad, some of them were dying from health reasons as well. Those dead bodies were often put down in ditches or wherever. These lions came across like the first 5 bodies. They ate human flesh for the first time off of dead workers. Or that's the supposed thought because the remains were that of being eaten by a lion. This poor hygiene and diet changed caused dental disease in these lions. I'm not kidding. It really did. So when they did x-rays from these lions, one of them had a severe tooth abscess. And so the crazy part is because lions had not hunted humans, for the first so many people killed, one lion went in and drug a worker out at night, one at a time, while the other one stood watch in case something happened, until they got bold enough for both lions to go in and take a person each. And they ate humans because they are softer than other animals, and it didn't hurt that lion's tooth.
I did not know that. That's
The lion wouldn't
interesting.
eat, and his male, most likely his brother, his male partner, realized that he wouldn't eat, so they changed their food source. And that's why this was so prolific, is because since it was the only thing they could eat and these people were in the same spot every time, they kept going back to the same source. And it's stated that in that Hunter's notes, the Patterson guy,
Yeah.
that his total count, including the dead workers that were found eaten after they had passed, and then the ones that had been pulled out of camp, was 135.
Mm.
And it was just those 2 lions.
An incredible story. And like you said, I don't care how much they romanticize it. I really don't. And the artistic license, feel free. If it entertains me, which it did and does, um, I'm fine with any of that. But the fact that it's reality based, um, it gives it a special quality for me. Like, we've talked about other movies. Jeremiah Johnson's reality based. Those, you know, and I'm sure that there was a lot of artistic license taken in that film as well. But in this one, it's, and like you said, we've both seen the lions.
Yeah.
They were real, and they really did. Whether it was 30
And
or
they weren't
130
big.
or 230, they killed a lot of people, and they're part of history.
But
And,
the coolest part is they weren't big, they were just incredibly smart.
yeah, and I don't know, there's a portion of the movie where they find the cave, and
Mhm.
there's all these human remains in this cave that they're just dragging these people back there, or pieces of these people back there, and eating them. And I don't know if that part's true,
So I
but
don't
when
know if the den was real, but that's in part of, like, the points. Um, but of one of the articles I was reading, there's 4 points, and it says in 1898 there was an outbreak of a cattle plague which left the lions with no food. So that was the first reason they started searching. Then the second main point is the lions developed an appetite for humans from eating dead men that were found in the Savo River region. Then the third point is the Hindus working on the railway had cremations for their dead, which initiated scavenging for the lions. So like those bones and all of that from the sites, or I'm sorry, that were in the cave that they brought from somewhere else. It is thought that the lions were finding these dead people and dragging their pieces back from non-fully cremated bodies and eating them, and that's what started it. And then due to their severe the fourth one, due to their severe dental disease, human prey was easier to catch and chew, and so it was softer and didn't hurt the lion's tooth. So I just thought, like, it's really fascinating to me
Oh
that
yeah.
this is not a change of like an entire wolf pack or a huge lion pack. This is two male lions who are stuck
Yes.
together, which at the time when this became popular, it was thought that males did not hunt together.
Right.
And so they not only hunted together, but they changed their food source, and then they scouted it and found a tactic that worked to be, I mean, realistically, unbelievably successful.
Well,
I mean, you think
it
about
goes
that, like a kill death ratio, that's 135 to 1. One dead lion, 135
well,
people.
and it's the old simple adage. It's that if you want to, you know, you have to take if you provide the food source, they're going to keep coming back. I
Right.
mean, this is what, you know, out in Yellowstone for years and years, you could just, there were places where you could just dump your garbage, your household garbage. Well, and bear encounters were at an all-time high because bears are coming to the dumps while people are there. And it's their
Well, and
food
this is
source.
Africa, man. I mean, this is you're you're getting some of the craziest animals on the planet, right? I
Oh
mean, you're
yeah.
not like we're not when their food source goes away, that means the easy once in a while antelope is gone. So when you're looking at a lion, especially if there's only two of them, let's assume the rest of their pride starved or they separated or whatever. Their primary food source is going to be what? Cape buffalo, or you can go after a sleeping human. I
Or a
mean,
dead one.
well, that's what I mean. Like, even
No,
at like a
it
watering hole out in Africa or
yeah.
wherever, it's like there are lions that get gored and killed, but it's like a barehanded human isn't going to do shit to a lion.
No. No. But again, it's one of those things. You keep providing the food source and they adapted to this food source.
Right.
And until it's taken away, they're going to keep using that food source. It's just like the dumps out west, you
And
keep
they can eat
dumping.
every day too.
Yeah.
That's a
And
huge
and
part.
guess what? In a dump, the prey doesn't run. A dead person doesn't run. They don't have to hunt. They just go there and eat. And then, all of a sudden, this tastes pretty good and it's easy on my teeth.
Right.
It's
I find that really fascinating because as much as that sounds like one of those odd details where people are like, that's a bunch of horse shit or whatever, or I don't know if that's why they did it. That doesn't seem like that big a deal. You can look at it in anything, in a racehorse, in any animal that has some sort of performance, whether it be hunting or not. If their teeth are messed up, they don't act right.
no, that's people don't.
And so, I mean, with that being found, it's like I would not be surprised at all if humans being softer is the reason that they went so crazy about it.
It totally makes sense. I one of my favorite generals and I'm a history guy, and
Yeah.
you know one of my favorite generals from the Civil War was William Tecumseh Sherman. And after the war, after the Civil War, and Sherman was very successful. He was a very successful general.
I mean, that is a bold take. I'm not talking about being successful, about him being your favorite. I want to get into that in a second, but go ahead and finish your story.
No, he what after the war, America's continuing to want to expand west. Well, one of the things that was in their way was the Indian population. And they
Hmm.
said, "Well, General Sherman, we want you to take care of that." He didn't go out and, yeah, I mean, he killed Indians, he killed Native Americans,
But
but that wasn't the first thing he did. He brought soldiers out there on rail cars,
I'm sure at the buffalo.
and they shot buffalo because that was the Indians' food source. And I mean, they would kill them and leave them lay, just shooting them from rail cars.
Well,
Like,
because once it starts to rot, the meat, all meat in one
they can't
congregated
use it
area gets
anymore.
ruined.
And and it was like, Sherman was very deliberate and very calculated. It's like, if you tell him you want him, like, the infamous story about Sherman is the March to the Sea from Atlanta to Savannah. He burned everything.
Well, that's what I mean. Like for him to be your favorite general, that dude was a slash and pillage and burn. I mean, that was
His famous quote, and he had several, and was a man of few words, but one of them was, both he and Grant, who were very tight, they were cut out of the same cloth in a lot of ways.
yeah.
And one of his quotes that I remember very well was, and they felt, the South separated the Union. That's what they were pissed about. The South was breaking up the Union by seceding. That's what Grant and Sherman were mad about. Now, Grant wasn't an active abolitionist, but he believed, and I think he was, certainly in his later days, he was an active abolitionist as far as slavery goes. But he didn't believe in slavery. He wasn't a strong, and he never was. But, he and Sherman, they were in lockstep, and Sherman said, if this is the remedy that they have chosen, they being the South, let us give them their fill. So that means when I go through these towns and I take a town from Atlanta all the way to the ocean, I'm burning the town. I don't want them to be able to help the military. I don't want them to be able to provide cotton. I don't want them to be able to provide food. It was a very simple goal. That's how, that in those days, that's how you win. That's how you win a war. They
But I
called
mean,
these,
the difference between that style and Hitler is not that far of a stretch.
well, no, and I mean, war tactics are war tactics, and war is not pretty. That's why Sherman said that.
No, it was just the burning and all that. Those and again, it was what had to be done to win. I'm not saying it
Yeah,
shouldn't have been done. It's just like there's part of it that's grotesque, but
it
obviously the
is.
argument goes the other way too. I mean, like just as much as what Sherman did is almost unspeakable. At the same time, if you truly look at the stats, if you look at the battles, you could have saved probably 30 to 50% of the lives if Robert E. Lee wasn't on the South. Because
Well,
he extended their life. He prolonged their war with those tactics. So I mean, there's so many like perverse facts involved in the Civil War, not just family against family, but the tactics in which it was done, and then the fact that someone like Robert E. Lee, being as successful as he was, is what made it become so brutal. Because had he not had the success that he had, the war would have not only been quicker, but the tactics wouldn't have had to have been as disgusting.
the ironic thing is that, and there's a special, and it's a 3-part series on Grant. And people talk about Grant being a butcher as a general, and he made mistakes, he did. But the one thing that he would do is fight. And that's why he became the first lieutenant general in American history since George Washington. Lincoln brought back that rank for Grant because he'd fight. Now, when Grant became president, people called him a butcher as a general, and by ratio, because Grant's army was much larger than Robert E. Lee's. Robert E. Lee lost almost as many men as Grant did. He didn't lose as many, but by ratio of the total number of troops, he lost more. When Grant became president, everybody said, well, things are corrupt and, he was a bad president. Grant did the most for black people of any president from Lincoln on through John F. Kennedy. I mean, he was all about rights for people, not just white people, for all people. And so if you get a chance, and I know we got off Ghost in the Darkness, 1996 film, Val Kilmer, Michael Douglas, I highly recommend it if you like adventure type movies. This is one of those. And I know we got off that talking about this, but that Grant special and it was on the History Channel. It's really, really good, and it's not boring. There's a lot of dramatizations of, like there's actors in it. It's not just a documentary. There's actors in it, and there's dramatizations of things that really happened, and they really happened. And, Robert E. Lee even said, war is a terrible and beautiful thing. Everybody likes seeing all the troops lined up and polished up and marching in battle.
And I'm glad the North won, obviously. I mean, it was better for mankind, but I have grown to respect, more specifically, Robert E. Lee's position and some of the overglorification of generals from the North. And it wasn't their intellect or their success, but
they had superior firepower in every
nobody
way.
did more with less than Robert E. Lee did.
For sure he did. For sure he did. I mean, the North had the rail lines. They eventually took the Mississippi.
Firearm productions.
All of that.
The
industry,
soldiers.
The North had it, for sure. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely correct. But again, that Grant miniseries on, and it was on the History Channel. Again, it's not all documentaries and still photos with a narrator. There's a narrator, but it's not like the Civil War documentary with Ken Burns, and I love that. But it's not like that. There are dramatizations of real things that really happened. And I think if you watch that and if you paid attention to that, and by you I mean anyone,
right?
I think that you would come away with a whole lot different opinion about Grant than what we all learned in school. I remember, history was my favorite subject, and I remember
it was very biased.
Junior high, and he was a butcher.
He was a tyrant. Yeah, all of it.
Yeah, he had a corrupt, and his administration while he was in office, some of them were corrupt, but Grant wasn't. Grant was not. And like I said, he did more for civil rights. In my opinion, and Lincoln did the Emancipation Proclamation, so that abolished slavery.
What?
Grant did as much for black people in the United States as Lincoln did he was all about reconstruction of the South after the war, during his presidency.
Although they're a president, they're still human. I mean, I think people forget that. There's still people, they still make mistakes. I look at, and I don't want to get into today's politics, but I look at that today and like a lot of people that at least from the crowds that I know of, have been disappointed in some of Biden's actions. And even when I look at that and what his reputation will be when he's no longer president, I don't think I'll see him for all of the flaws. I feel bad that we are treating an old man this way who I don't think is of sound mind. And so there's even like you were talking about Grant and how people view him one way because of what we're taught and all of this. And it's like people forget that he's human. There will be mistakes. We got to look at the good he's done. When I look at Biden, sometimes I think people forget that he's a human. And it's like some people probably don't feel this way, and that's fine, but I feel like we're taking advantage of an old man right now, and it doesn't feel right, and it doesn't sit well, and people almost detach the human essence from him, and that bothers me.
He's an easy target for sure. He
Yeah.
is. And if you peel back the onion a little bit, like you said, he's a human being. And if you show me one that hasn't made a mistake, I'll show you somebody that's way overrating
Well, and I
themselves.
just look at it like how hard would it be for me to question and confuse my grandpa by
Oh, and
frustrating,
you're under the microscope 24/7.
right? I'm not talking about the administration, the politics. No, we're not talking about that. Leave all that aside. Everybody can have their own belief. We're talking about this guy at his age, under the lights, the pressure he's being put on, whether he's of sound mind or not. That is what I will take away from this. And depending on the narrative that's written, whether he's successful or whether he's a failure, people are going to have a skewed view of him. And I just think it's unfortunate. I'm not a Biden fan, by the way, but I just think it's unfortunate that an old man's being put in this scenario. And we do have to realize people are human and treat them with human dignity. And that's something that I do think when you Sherman and Grant, it's like both of them. I was taught they were slash and burn. They were tyrants. The things they did were unbelievable, but they did it because it was victory at all costs. And although those might be factual elements, it's like they are human, and we also have to flip the other side of the coin. It's like, okay, but if they don't burn that down and they push past, when they turn around when they're in trouble, is there going to be a rebuilt army behind them?
Yeah.
So, I mean, there is the
Look,
human issue to that. So
we can trust me, if you ever want to, and if you ever want to talk about this again, or if our audience, what there is,
I hope
ever
we
wants
didn't.
to hear about this again, I could talk about this for a long time
I can do
because
that with wild animals too. So I would love to
yeah,
talk about nature more.
but yeah, there's a lot of misnomers out there about, and again, I was taught the same thing. I was taught that, and it's like it's just not true. It just isn't true. It wasn't what happened.
And so much is based off of the inflection too, right? Like if you have a passionate teacher who, let's say, is easily offended, they might make something sound more horrific than if they had just blatantly, in a monotone voice, said the exact fact.
And this is brought up in that Grant miniseries. Most of the authors and that were writing books about the Civil War, especially just after the war, were Southern.
Yeah.
So there's a Southern skew on a lot of things that we took as being fact that
and
aren't
a Southern
necessarily
religious skew too.
They're and it's romanticized, you know, because they're the underdog. They were did more with less, which they did. But there's a lot of
They
that
also got shit on.
The real facts kind of get skewed. But again, I could talk about that for a long time, and hopefully we can again.
Yeah, I mean, we're coming up on an hour and 40 minutes. It's probably a good time to wrap up. I do think nature's a good conversation. I think we both have an appreciation for that, so maybe we'll pick something out. Is there a movie that you would like to talk about for this next coming episode?
Well, I don't know if you had seen the Paramount. Did you see the Paramount series last year called 1883?
No, I did not.
It's a prequel to Yellowstone. It's a very popular Paramount series now. And I have not watched an episode of Yellowstone. It has Kevin Costner in it. But I did watch this, and it was only like 8 or 9 episodes of this 1883, and it's the characters before it's a prequel to Yellowstone.
What's the 2-second synopsis? Is this more heading out that way or struggle
the
with
journey
natives or
there.
what?
It's
So
the
this is
journey
Oregon
to get
Trail?
it's the journey to get there. Not necessarily the Oregon Trail and all of it, but
But I
it's a
mean the
real
similar story, right?
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
and it has, Tim McGraw and Faith Hill, and they're both really good. It has Sam Elliott in it, who's always good.
Phenomenal. Best
Yeah,
mustache in the game.
and then last night, so they're not continuing that 1883. Last night, one debuted called 1923. And again, it's the same family, but it's still another prequel to the current Yellowstone family.
That's
This John,
awesome.
yeah, and Harrison Ford is the lead. Who's
I
I
was
don't know
gonna
how
say
old
it's 40
Harrison
years
Ford
later,
is,
so the whole cast is pretty much
but
dead then, right?
he's believable. I mean, I watched it last night, and again, it's Western, it's open spaces, so it's got my attention right away.
Right.
But yeah, so if you want to talk about either of those, or maybe I don't know if you want to talk about this one or not. Dances with Wolves.
We can talk about that. That's fine.
We could talk about Dances with Wolves because that's another one that's way up high on my list.
Yeah, there's I mean, again, way more of a you movie than a me movie, but there's a part of that movie, um, his bond with the wolf.
Yeah,
That's
some
something that
great.
always stuck with me. But it's a very good movie.
Yeah, we
Um,
could talk about that next time.
all right. Well, sounds good. And then also you said there'll be a lot of bowl games coming up, so we'll have a little bit of college football to talk about next week as well, right?
Bowl games started last Friday. You know, there's about 40 of them, and even some of the no-name bowl. There's a bowl game on right now. UConn and Marshall, but surprisingly, some of these no-name bowl games have been really good games. So yeah, we could talk about some of that. We could talk about Dances with Wolves or another movie. And you always ask for suggestions and comments, and I
Yes.
second that motion. It's like, please, if there's something you want us to talk about, I'd love to do that.
Yeah, actually, Big Dog did comment to me about that. He liked our episode. He said, it hit close to home because obviously that's from where he lives, but also it was something he was interested in. So if anyone else has a topic like that, we'd love to have a conversation about it. And again, if you guys have any other comments, whether it's the length or something with the quality or anything of that nature, we'd love to hear any type of feedback from you guys. If you like our content, please share it with people. We're hoping to grow. Also, please hit that like button. The likes, they tremendously help the video. It helps our impression rate. It helps us get exposed to other people on the internet and helps us in the recommended category. So those things are greatly appreciated. If you're returning to the channel and you're not subscribed, it's free. Just click on the button, and that way you'll get a notification when we have new content come up. We try and do it every week. But other than that, it was fun talking to you, Dad. Everybody, peace out, be safe, be smart, make good choices, and I'll see you later. Love you, Dad.
Love you too, buddy.
Bye bye.